Born on the 4th of July.
I want to be where the people are. I want to see them dancing.
The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
Mookie!
So you know it's the...
What?
Come here, no brothers up on the wall.
Man, ask Sal, right?
Do the Right Thing. 3 movies that earned a spot on either Gene's or my list of the year's outstanding films, or maybe they're on both lists. We'll find out on this special edition of Siskel and Ebert. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. This time of year, film critics traditionally have made their lists and checked them at least twice for the best and worst films of the year. And here with our choices, our individual choices of the best films of 1989. We're each going to review 4 of our top choices, and then at the end of the show, we'll name, in our opinion, the best film of the year and our complete lists of the top 10. And Roger starts now with the number 6 film on his list.
Okay, let's start out. Number 6 on my list is The Mighty Quinn, which came out last February and impressed me as one of the year's big, robust, happy entertainment films. The movie was a thriller with wall-to-wall reggae music, and it starred Denzel Washington as a police chief on a Caribbean island. Unlike a lot of thrillers, this one was more interested in characters than in violence or in special effects, and there was an especially intriguing relationship between Washington and his wife, played by Cheryl Lee Ralph. She wants to devote all of her time to a singing career.
I got to go, Xavier.
Where you going?
We have the audition tonight.
Maybe I come and see you.
Don't.
I remember walking into The Mighty Quinn with not particularly high hopes, and walking out at the end amazed by how much I'd enjoyed the movie.
I was amazed too, and I think it's a terrific musical, and we get very few musicals anymore in the American cinema, and this picture had it, and I think you're right. It wasn't concerned about violence like so many murder mysteries. It was much more interested in the character. It was very close to making my top 10.
Oh, it didn't make your top 10?
12, I think, was on my list. I had 19 pictures this year that I thought qualified as top 10 stuff, and that was pretty good for me.
One of the things I liked about the film was how many supporting characters it had. It was like one of those old Warner Brothers pictures from the 40s with Emmett Walsh going around scheming against everybody, and all those guys in the background even added to the atmosphere.
It's a terrific, terrific picture. My number 6 pick is The Little Mermaid, a marvelous return to the great Disney tradition of animated fairy tales. And what distinguishes this film from others, I think, is that The Little Mermaid includes probably the wittiest songs in Disney's history.
Les poissons, how I love les poissons. Love to chop and to serve little fish. First I cut off their heads and I pull out their bones. Ah mais oui, ça c'est toujours délicieux.
2 of the most endangered types of films during the 80s were the animated feature and the musical. And my vote for The Little Mermaid is recognition that this little picture represents potentially the rebirth of both kinds of movies. And I'm really rooting for, in addition to the animated film, the musical to make a comeback.
It was a marvelous film. It's not quite in my top 10. I think it's down around the same place that you put The Mighty Quinn, just out of the top 10. But it is certainly a wonderful animated film, a wonderful fantasy.
Remember the sequence at the end of Under the Sea where they have that fast cutting of all the musical images? Now, I know that that can be generated after they've been drawn. They can generate that through editing. But that was such a riot of color that it reminded me of Roger Ebert, where they just pop your eyes out with stuff. That's exciting to see.
It was great. Coming up next, Gene and I pick more titles on our separate lists of the best films of 1989.
Continuing our countdown of the best films of 1989, my number 5 choice is Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July, an angry, sweeping epic story of one man's battle for and then against the United States involvement in Vietnam. The soldier in turmoil is gung-ho Marine Ron Kovic, played by Tom Cruise, initially as a rah-rah all-American boy.
I'm going to boot camp soon. I joined the Marines for 4 years, so I go to Vietnam. They say I'll probably go right on the front line.
Kovic is wounded in combat, and director Stone's portrayal of the combat scenes that end up crippling Kovic are just as compelling as the ones he used in his last Vietnam movie, Platoon. It's what happens when Kovic comes home, confined to a wheelchair, that is the centerpiece of this film. He feels betrayed and leads a protest against the war and his government. Tom Cruise is wonderful, encompassing nearly 20 years of a man's life, but what also makes this film worthy of top 10 status are brief scenes in a military hospital in which we see the routine degradation that a crippled soldier must endure merely with his bodily functions. We so rarely see the true effects of a bullet wound in a movie. Born on the 4th of July smacks us in the face with that reality.
It sure does, and it also smacks us in the face with the reality of what this country went through during that war as encapsulated in the life of this man, Ron Kovic, who volunteered for the Marines, thought it was his duty to go over there, didn't care. So he said, if I give my life for my country. And after what happened to him and he came back, went through an entire about-face in his opinions about the war. It's a good film. I have it a little higher on my list. It's number 4 on my list.
Okay, well, you know what?
So what does that mean,
yeah,
you know?
Well, you know what I want
4 versus 5.
Yeah, the thing that is important for me is that this film doesn't hedge its argument. It doesn't try to be balanced.
Yeah.
It's saying it was wrong and that's it, and here's the guy that paid the price.
That's one of the things I like about Oliver Stone, is that Oliver Stone never leaves any doubt as to exactly where he stands in these films. Next movie. My choice for the number 5 movie of the year was the funniest single movie of the year, in my opinion, a documentary called Roger and Me. This was the movie with a fairy tale story made by a man from Flint, Michigan named Michael Moore, who sold his house and held a weekly bingo game and garage sales to raise money for his hilarious and sometimes really wounding attack on what General Motors had done to his hometown. After the town lost 30,000 jobs, it tried a series of feather-brained schemes to resurrect itself, including an ill-advised attempt at tourism.
Jackie, what are some of the things that visitors ask us here?
First off, where's the bathroom? That's the question I get asked most. Then, what is there to do in Flint?
To call Roger and Me a documentary is to miss the whole point. This is a feature film using some real people and some real events to make the kind of satirical points that a Woody Allen or a Mark Twain would also understand. After a decade in which America has worshipped at the shrine of higher profits and more ruthless business executives, here is the movie a lot of people were waiting for: a raucous, angry, funny, unforgiving counterattack against corporate greed. The amazing thing is that the whole movie is so entertaining. At last, the have-nots get back at the haves.
Which is the tradition of American movies. I mean, the movies were always the little man's way of getting back, knocking off the banker's hat with a snowball, one of the earliest images in any silent film. And this picture knocks off a lot of bankers' hats with a fusillade of snowballs. And the film really ranges, I mean, it's very funny, there are lots of sequences, and then all of a sudden we get a tracking shot through Flint, Michigan, and the place looks like it's bombed out. World War III has hit the place, and it's devastated. And there are just so many things here. This is why I like documentary material over made-up material most of the time, because you cannot conceive of some of the goofy things to present Auto World, which they build in the town that has just been devastated by the departure of the automobile industry.
I'll come to see a miniature reenactment of everything that no longer exists anywhere else in town. Yeah,
it's just amazing.
Was this on your list of the top 10?
Yes.
Good.
2.
Number 2.
And that meant something, because I really think that there were 2 great films this year, and that is one of them. I mean, great for all-time great. Coming up next, we'll move up to the list to bring you more of the best movies of 1989. Special show. My number 4 choice of the best films of 1989 is Paul Mazursky's Enemies, a Love Story, a biting, occasionally funny, but mostly profoundly sad portrait of a Jewish refugee from the Nazis, resettled in New York City right after World War II. Ron Silver plays this haunted, wounded soul who winds up with 3 wives: a woman he married in Europe, a Polish woman who saved his life, and the voluptuous woman he consorts with in New York.
I must stay here in Baltimore another day. In a bookstore. Yeah, I'm in a bookstore. Well, it's a jungle bookstore.
When I first reviewed this film, I called it on the show one of the saddest movies I've ever seen, and I stand by that, but I also want to repeat that that doesn't make it any less entertaining. Enemies, a Love Story is based on a novel by Isaac Bashevis Singer, and it is a very brave commercial movie, and distinguishes a lot of my films on this list, Roger, are pictures that were willing to take a risk by being not these upbeat entertainments, and this is one of them.
Now, we had a big discussion about this movie when we first reviewed it on the show, based on the fact that you were talking about how sad it was.
And it is sad.
And I've been thinking about that ever since. And it seems to me that your problem is you're focusing only on the hero, on the male character and how sad his life is. And this is really a movie about 4 people, each one with a different destiny, and some of whom actually do prevail and get on with their lives and are able to rebound and are not destroyed and are able to lead productive lives. And that's as important in the movie as the fact that the Silver character, for example, goes off to California and is never heard of again, apparently disappearing into his own misery.
Okay, but except that he is the link to all of them. He is the one that connects them, and so he's the constant through this, and so his story is the one that it would be natural to focus upon.
Isaac Bashevis Singer, who wrote the story, was a person who writes ironically about the humor that he finds in life, even in sadness. And so it's all of a piece.
I'm reviewing the movie here. I'm reviewing the movie, and that movie is profoundly sad to me and profoundly entertaining and better than any kind of giddy film that you can name.
Okay, so we haven't cheered Gene up at all
and we haven't changed our opinions either.
Okay, now let's move on to the number 3 film on my list, which is My Left Foot, one of the most effective biographies I've ever seen at the movies. The film is the story of Christy Brown, a man who was born in Dublin with cerebral palsy, so severe that the only part of his body he could really control was his left foot. Many people thought he was retarded, but not his mother, who was rewarded one day when he began to write a message on the floor. As an adult, Christy Brown became a painter, a poet, a writer, and something of a Dublin legend. That is Daniel Day-Lewis as Christy Brown, and the great life force of this man is what shines through his fascinating, heroic, and amazingly successful life. My Left Foot is a terrific movie, number 3 on my list.
And very close to making my top 10. I think I had around 13. It's all that you said it is. He is extremely good. I think I said this before about this Daniel Day-Lewis, that if Dustin Hoffman can win an Oscar for Rain Man, this guy ought to win one for this role. If we're going to be talking about playing a person who's crippled in one way or another. And I just haven't seen anything like this, period.
Not only is it a great performance, but also the fact that they're able to show the whole
family
life that surrounds him. The way that what saves Christy Brown is the fact that he's not institutionalized. He's right there in the middle of an enormous family. He gets a lot of hands-on attention, a lot of love.
The film stays a lot in the house. And I think that that's great, because that's exactly the scenes that you don't normally get to see. It's always the person triumphing over odds and being heroic out in public. Well, it's the private life that is the real tough victory. Coming up next, we'll get to the top of our lists, our choices for the best movie of 1989.
We'll show the best films of the year. The number 2 movie on my list, the year's second best film, is Drugstore Cowboy, a movie set in the early 1970s and starring Matt Dillon as the leader of a small gang of dropouts who cruise the Pacific Northwest, stealing drugs from drugstores and leading a life of aimless waste and brief adventure.
I'm a junkie. I like drugs. I like the whole lifestyle, but it just didn't pay off.
Drugstore Cowboy was directed by a man named Gus Van Sant Jr., who does such a good job of creating the period and the world of these characters that we drift right into it, not only because it's exciting, but because we can sense that for this time and this place, the characters have created a family for themselves. For a while, it seems to work. Then things start to go out of control. Drugstore Cowboy follows its characters as they get into one bad place after another until, finally, for the Matt Dillon character, using drugs is just more trouble than it's worth.
What I like about this film, you used a word called aimless, and the story follows the characters. For me, the very best movies are ones that have a time compression that doesn't seem to be like it's being compressed. They go along at a leisurely pace. This picture, you might as well be in the back seat of the car and standing in the group as they're walking. It doesn't seem hurried. So, you know, when you get that quick cutting of films.
I felt as if I knew them. I felt as if I cared for them. At the end of the movie, one of them makes it out of this lifestyle. One of them certainly doesn't. 2 more are left in a holding pattern. And I really cared about what happened to them.
It was my number 3 film, so we both had it quite high on our list. And now, finally, my number 1 selection of 1989, and this was a quite easy choice. It's Spike Lee's magnificent racial drama, Do the Right Thing. Writer-director Spike Lee displaying a beautiful, rich, lyrical filmmaking style in his depiction of a racial explosion at an Italian pizzeria in a black neighborhood in New York City.
Mr. Radio Raheem, I can't even hear myself think! You are disturbing me!
Now, I've seen Do the Right Thing 4 times already, and each time I have tried to communicate to friends what is so special about this picture. First, when you watch it, you just know in your heart that this film is very wise about racial hatred in this country, and not just black-white. Unlike so many films, this picture has a real strong handle on a truth that is desperately important to all of us. Also, this movie is a great piece of filmmaking. Images and music and performances, the way the camera tracks up and down this one block on this brutally hot day, and images of ice cubes being rubbed on people and pizza and pictures on the wall. It has such a fresh way of structuring a narrative, and it's one of those rare films that forces you to talk about it long after you've left the theater. It's not, and this is something I try to communicate to friends of mine who have not seen this picture. It's not, as you might expect, full of doctrinaire black hatred against whites. Rather, Do the Right Thing is a beautiful, wailing cry to fight the racial hatred that separates one of us from all the rest of us.
To me, one of the most telling evidences of the underlying racism in this country is the number of white people I've talked to who saw this film and who thought that it was anti-white. This movie is not anti-white, it is not anti-black. I believe that anyone of any race with an open mind would come out of Do the Right Thing knowing more and empathizing more with the position of the other race than they had when they came in. This is a movie of unity. This is a movie of communication. It's a movie in which Spike Lee is trying to say, I've opened my eyes, I've tried to look at what's happening here, and here's what I saw. That's what the movie is about.
Well, I mean, you could also argue that this film is anti the behavior of the black and white and Oriental people in this film. No one does the right thing. They're all making mistakes that lead to an explosion at the end.
That is the key thing. And a lot of people, incidentally, I might add as a footnote, this is also my pick as the number one.
I knew it would be.
Number one film of the year.
Had to be.
Another thing that happens in the film is people do things you don't want them to do. There's one very attractive character, Mookie, played by Spike Lee. He's the one who throws the garbage can through the window that starts the trouble. People say, why did Mookie do it? Because they want that cliche. They want some angry radical or some criminal element to throw the garbage. Why did the nice kid throw the garbage can? And I think Spike Lee is saying, because sometimes things build up in that way. There's just so much pain here. There's so much tension here. Yeah, and that's why people, when you come out of the movie, you've got to talk about it. Yeah. You've got to figure out for yourself what the right thing is.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is that when we've talked about this, again, I can hear people tuning out that saying, I don't want, all right, I know you're supposed to be nice to your brother and your neighbor and all that stuff. I don't want to be lectured to. Again, I repeat, this is a joyful film. It's very funny.
It's not a lecture.
It is very funny. It's beautiful, natural filmmaking.
And it's number one on both of our lists. Now, here is my entire list of the year's 10 best movies. Number 10 on the list, Say Anything, written and directed by Cameron Crowe, which may have looked like another teenage movie, but was actually an intelligent, perceptive story of human nature with great performances by Ione Skye, John Cusack, and John Mahoney. Number 9, Bruce Beresford's Driving Miss Daisy, based on the play by Alfred Uhry, with its wonderful rapport between Morgan Freeman and Jessica Tandy as a middle-aged chauffeur and the old Southern lady who thinks she doesn't need a chauffeur until he convinces her otherwise. Number 8, Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors, his best movie since Hannah and Her Sisters, starring Martin Landau as a man who allows a murder to take place just to make life a little easier for himself. Number 7, Field of Dreams, written and directed by Phil Alden Robinson and starring Kevin Costner in a fabulous fantasy about an Iowa farmer who builds a baseball diamond in his cornfield and sees the ghosts of the past playing ball there. As I said earlier, number 6 on my list was The Mighty Quinn, written by Hampton Fancher and directed by Carl Schinkel. Number 5, Roger and Me, written and directed by Michael Moore. Number 4, Born on the 4th of July, directed by Oliver Stone and written by Stone and Ron Kovic. Number 3, My Left Foot, directed by Jim Sheridan and co-written by Sheridan and Shane Connaughton. Number 2, Drugstore Cowboy, directed by Gus Van Sant Jr. and written by Van Sant and Daniel Yost. And number 1, the best film of 1989 was Do the Right Thing, written and directed by Spike Lee.
And now here from number 10 to number 1 are my choices of the best films of 1989. Number 10, Danny DeVito's film of Warren Adler's novel of divorce American style, brutal style, The War of the Roses, with a screenplay by Michael Leeson, a film aggressively nasty with a simple message, divorce is brutal. Number 9, Cameron Crowe's Say Anything, a most intelligent teenage love story that also featured a rare movie relationship between a troubled father and his devoted daughter. We don't get too many of those kinds of stories. Number 8, writer-director Steve Kloves' The Fabulous Baker Boys, a smart and mature entertainment about a couple of brothers whose musical careers take off, but whose personal relationship founders when a glamorous singer enters their lives. Number 7, Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors, which I've come to view as nothing less than an investigation of whether God exists? And the answer here is not likely. And recapping now my top movie picks, number 6, the animated feature The Little Mermaid. Number 5, Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July. Number 4, Paul Mazursky's Enemies, A Love Story. Number 3, Gus Van Sant Jr.'s Drugstore Cowboy. Number 2, Michael Moore's wildly funny and angry Roger and Me. And finally, number 1, clearly, in my opinion, the best film of 1989, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing.
And you know, there's one thing that just jumps right out for me from our 2 lists. No foreign films. Neither one of us a single foreign film. This is the first time that's happened to me in 22 years.
It maybe is also for me, and Eric Romer always makes my list, and I didn't think his film this year was that special.
The best ones I saw were Chocolat by Claire Denis.
That was number 11 for me.
And L'Actrice, another very good movie.
Yeah, Chocolat was real close.
Foreign films are not really doing too well in America these days, either coming here or being all that great when they get here. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with the other side of the coin, the worst films of 1989. That's when we get another chance for revenge against the movies that made us miserable during the year just past. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Snowcaps, Raisinets, and Goobers. 3 big box office hits starring Nestle Milk Chocolate. Moviegoers give them a definite 2 thumbs up. KitchenAid, double-door refrigerator, trash compactor, portable convertible dishwasher, and solid-state touch options washer-dryer, all in almond. KitchenAid, for the way it's made. Johnny Cat is America's #1 premium cat litter. And now with our new drawstring litter box liners, Johnny Cat and a little privacy is all any cat needs. Martin Lawrence Gallery's beautiful limited edition Serograph Giant by Linea Pergola. It's numbered and hand-signed and available at Martin Lawrence Galleries throughout the United States.